Mic check 1 2. So I want to take you through my handheld collection for the Game Gear, the original Game Boy, the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, and the Neo Geo Pocket. And after that, I want to talk about a little bit about the concept of all killer, no filler, because it's a comment that I've gotten on my channel for the past few days. I've gotten some comments of people talking about how they've utilized the method of trading in some of their more common stuff or games that they know that they can easily get back to get more harder to find games or more what you would call grail items. So let's first go through my handheld collection. So I only have 4 Game Gear games. I had a Game Gear, but it broke, so I need to get a new one. So I have Sonic 2 on the Game Gear, KO, George Foreman's KO, NBA Jam, and Sonic Triple Trouble. These are 4 games that I actually got from a thrift store. They had them all in like this little baggie. And so I just picked them all up. I used to have other Game Gear games that I traded away. I actually regret trading those games away, but it is what it is. Now let's get into my original Game Boy collection, which includes Star Wars. Then we have Spider-Man 3. Then we have the Pokemon games. So Pokemon Yellow, we have Pokemon Red, we have Pokemon Blue, and we have Pokemon Gold. So I know these aren't all the Pokemon games on the original Game Boy. I think I'm missing Silver. But we have the Pokemon games. And honestly, this is really kind of like the only version of Pokemon that really speaks to me, because this is the Pokemon that came out when I was at like the Pokemon age to really like enjoy Pokemon. I was probably like, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12, maybe even 13 when this came out. So that was when I was actually playing Pokemon consistently. Then you have Battle Unit Zeoth, really great shoot 'em up. You have Super Mario Land 2, geez. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, so 3 more Game Boy games there. We have Mega Man 2, we have Super Mario Land, the original one. We have Mega Man 3, we have The Amazing Spider-Man, and then we have Castlevania Adventure. So another kind of random mix of original Game Boy games there. Then we have Blaster Master Boy. We have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Fall of the Foot Clan, Batman, Return of the Joker. So this is actually probably one of my favorite original Game Boy games. Probably the best. The only 2 that compete with Batman, in my opinion, for the original Game Boy, and this is just my personal preference, Metroid 2 rather, not Super Metroid, but Metroid 2, the second installment in the Metroid series. This is an amazing game. I played so much of this on the original Game Boy. And then Darkwing Duck. These 4 games, I probably played the most on the original Game Boy during my childhood. Really great stuff. So those are the original Game Boy games. Then I have some Game Boy Color games. We have Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening. So that's another Game Boy Color there. We have the Legend of Zelda, the Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. And then we have Kirby Tilt and Tumble, a recent pickup. So some really cool stuff. So as you can see, like in my Game Boy collection and in the Game Gear collection, a lot of the games that I have here are really nostalgic to me for the most part. I do have a couple randoms in there, here and there. But we'll talk about what I do with the randoms and games that I'm not as tied to. Okay, so then we also have the Neo Geo Pocket. We have the Metal Slug First Mission. I only have 3 games for the Neo Geo Pocket, and that's Metal Slug First Mission, which you see here. Then we have Bust-A-Move Pocket. I used to play a lot of Bust-A-Move in the arcades, and then the only complete in box Neo Geo Pocket game that I have is my complete copy of Metal Slug Second Mission for the Neo Geo Pocket. Very, very good stuff here. One of my faves for sure. So that's the small but mighty Neo Geo Pocket collection. I used to have a couple more Neo Geo games, traded those away. Like I said, we're going to talk about the all killer, no filler thing. All right, now we're going to get into my Game Boy Advance collection, which I keep in this little funky box right here. Now, this is probably 50% of the Game Boy Advance collection that I used to have had way more way more Game Boy Advance games, but I just sold a lot of those games away. So let's dive into it here. So first game up, Super Mario 3, Super Mario Bros. 3. We have Ghouls and Ghosts on the Game Boy. Actually, a pretty cool version of Ghouls and Ghosts, I might add. Sword of Mana, another interesting one. Klonoa 2 on the Game Boy. Really colorful sprite-based game. Really nice. I like that one. Golden Sun. Double Dragon. Classic. Mega Man and Bass. Gradius Galaxies. You know I gotta have me a good shoot 'em up or two. Metroid Zero Mission. Astro Boy, a really good version of Astro Boy. You guys got to play this one. It's pretty good. Final Fight 1. So if you don't want to pay for a Final Fight CD on the Sega Saturn, this version also carries Guy in it. I think Guy comes in Final Fight CD, and then there's also Final Fight Guy. I think this kind of gives you the best of both worlds here, if I'm not mistaken. You guys can let me know down in the comments. You have Metal Slug Advanced, Super Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. We have Kirby Dream Land, Metroid Fusion. Got pretty deep in this one, then just fell off after a while. Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. Now this is a very beautiful looking version of Kirby. I really like that Kirby game. Wario Land 4, another beautiful looking game on the Game Boy Advance, if I do say so myself. Nightmare Before Christmas, an interesting platformer. Super Mario Advanced. I totally forgot I had that game. Bomberman Tournament. One of like the first Game Boy Advance pickups of this year. Shaman King 2, Masters of Spirits. If you like Castlevania, the Shaman King games on the Game Boy Advance are like another version of Castlevania. Seriously, you got to play the Shaman King games. They're pretty good. Okay, Legend of Zelda 4 Swords. Blender Bros. This is a very interesting one. If you've never heard of this game, check it out. Blender Bros. Super just interesting. Check that one out. It's an interesting platformer. Gunstar Superheroes. If you're a fan of run and gun shooters, you will love Gunstar. Definitely cool. I feel like I don't give my Game Boy Advance collection enough love. R-Type 3. You know I gotta have a good shoot 'em up on the Game Boy Advance. R-Type 3. This plays almost identical to Super R-Type 3 on the Super Nintendo. Nearly identical. Phalanx. Man, I forgot how many shooters I had on the Game Boy Advance. I got a few. Shaman King Master of Spirits. I played so much of this game during undergrad. Seriously, too much of this game. And I played a lot of this game on the Game Boy Micro. That's where I played that game. It's funny. What is this? This is Jazz the Jackrabbit. This is another very like random, uncommon kind of platformer style game. This is kind of like right up there with Blender Bros, just very obscure on the Game Boy Advance. You don't hear a lot of people talk about that one. Street Fighter Alpha 3. Whoa, man, this thing has seen some better days, but at least it's authentic. Street Fighter Alpha 3. This is a very good port of Street Fighter Alpha 3. Surprisingly good. It doesn't have all of the voice acting and stuff, but very, very good, especially for Game Boy Advance. A very good version of Street Fighter Alpha 3. Contra Advanced. Nice. Run and gun shooter there. What else we got here? Dragon Ball Adventure. Oh my gosh, this is probably the best beat 'em up on the Game Boy Advance. If you never played this game, you gotta check it out. I think there's actually a copy of this available on GameStop's website, but you gotta be careful because GameStop often confuses this game with like one of the like Legacy of Goku games. And also this game is faked a lot. There are a lot of fake versions of this game, but this is a very, very good beat 'em up. Highly, highly recommend that one. Castlevania, Aria of Sorrow, this is considered the best one on the Game Boy Advance. Um, you've got, what else we have in here? Castlevania, Circle of the Moon. Ooh, this one is a little bit in rough shape for sure. I actually picked up another copy of this game. I should have kept the copy I picked up. I thought my copy was better, but no, my copy is in rough shape. Okay, next up, we have, another Castlevania game. We have Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance, another Castlevania game there. And then last but not least, for loose cards, we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is a surprisingly good beat 'em up. This is a very interesting side-scrolling beat 'em up. Um, this one plays a lot like, what was that? What was that game that came out? It was a beat 'em up. And it was like locked to the PlayStation 3 for a long time. Scott Pilgrim, that's what it is. This game plays a lot like Scott Pilgrim, in my opinion. But you guys let me know. So this is the loose cart Game Boy Advance collection, and it's funny again. This is like, I want to say this might even be like 35% of the games that I used to have. I used to have way more Game Boy Advance games, but there came a point where I just kind of pared all of the games down to just the ones that I really wanted, and my collection was really just made up of like platformers, beat 'em ups, shoot 'em ups, and run and gun shooters, as you could see, because I have a lot of beat 'em ups in the collection. I have a good amount of shooters in the collection. But over the years, I've kind of added games back to the collection slowly, slowly. That's where you see games like Golden Sun and Bomberman, which I actually picked this up when buying a Game Boy Advance. It was just in the Game Boy Advance, so I kept it. So this is the loose cart Game Boy Advance collection. And then I do have some complete in box, actually some sealed Game Boy Advance games, including one of my favorites, Gunstar Heroes Advance. So what am I saying? Gunstar Heroes Advance. Sorry, Guardian Heroes Advance. I'm a huge fan of the Guardian Heroes games. I have Guardian Heroes on the Sega Saturn. This is a very cool beat 'em up. And this is a very interesting take on it. I mean, really good graphics, really cool gameplay. I really like this one. This is definitely one I recommend you checking out. I had this loose, sold my loose copy, kept the sealed version. So that's one that I have. You could still find this too. And this is not really expensive at all. I think you can find a sealed copy of Guardian Advance Heroes these days for like 60 bucks, to be honest. It's like not that expensive. Factory sealed too. Another factory sealed game, F-Zero GP Legend. This is another one that's not super expensive, I don't think. I think a lot of these Game Boy Advance, sealed Game Boy Advance games are like, they've dropped. They were like in the hundreds, but now they're like maybe 60, 70 bucks. At least that's what I've seen them for. I don't know if they've gone back up, but F-Zero GP Legend, that's another sealed one for you. So Puzzle Fighter 2, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 on the Game Boy Advance. Another really cool port to the Game Boy Advance. Capcom did a good job bringing some of these fighters like Street Fighter Alpha, Puzzle Fighter 2 to the Game Boy Advance. This is a cool one. If you're a fan of like puzzle fighter game, if you're a fan of like Tetris and Street Fighter, you will like this one. Run and gun, gotta have your run and gun shooter. So Special CT Forces. This is like a very watered down Metal Slug game here. If you're a fan of the genre, I think you'll like it. Kind of gives me Gun Force vibes in a way. But CT Special Forces, and then you have CT Special Forces 2. So both of my copies are sealed there in the Game Boy Advance. And last but not least, this one isn't sealed, but it is complete in box. And I've had multiple copies of this game over the years. But Drill Dozer, probably my most expensive handheld game in my entire handheld collection. I would say Drill Dozer is probably almost tied with Metal Slug Advance. Sorry, what am I saying? Dude, get it together. Metal Slug Second Mission. It's really early, so I haven't had coffee yet. You guys are going to have to forgive me. I'm saying all types of erroneous stuff. But Metal Slug 2 Second Mission on the Neo Geo Pocket and Drill Dozer are probably some of my most expensive handhelds. And so this kind of leads me to the whole, all killer, no filler thing. I think for me, there was a point where space was an issue. Also, I just kind of wanted to do a real big purge in my collection. And sometimes I get to that point where I'm like, I realize I have games that I just do not want in my collection anymore. I'm not playing them. Maybe when I first bought them, I had intended on playing them, and just as time goes on, I realized, I actually don't want to play these games. These aren't games that I'm really like interested in, and so I want to purge them. And selling games isn't always easy depending on the game, because there isn't always like a really hot market for certain games, no matter how expensive price charting might say the game is. And in a lot of cases, you're better off like trading the game away than trying to like sell the game. So you're better off like leveraging it for a trade to get, some better games. And honestly, that's one of the ways that I've gotten a lot of the more expensive titles in my collection, is just by trading away some of the, games that I no longer want, to get some of the games that I would consider grail items. Now, filler is such a subjective term, and every time I use the term on my channel, I get someone in the comments all riled up and upset, like, that's not filler. You call this game filler? How dare you call this filler? It's like, you offend some people if you call their favorite game filler, right? Filler is a very subjective term. We're all going to have our own opinions on what we think filler might be. And we're all going to have our own opinions on what we think killer might be. Some people might think Drill Dozer is a waste of time and money. They might not consider that to be a killer Game Boy Advance game. They may feel the same way about Metal Slug. A lot of it is subjective. So, for the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to use values, like dollars and cents, how much the game is worth, to determine filler versus killer. Now, disclaimer, I understand that just because a game is cheap, it doesn't mean it's filler or a bad game, or it doesn't carry all of the attributes that one would consider a game to be filler, right? Doesn't mean it's whack or it's lame or it's not a fun game. You have a lot of games that carry filler price tags, but that are actually pretty good games. I mean, a prime example of that is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, I don't know if it's gone up over the past few years, but from a pricing perspective, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for a while would have had a filler price tag, but it is a very good beat 'em up, which is why it's in my collection. I think it's a good beat 'em up. Um, so again, just for the sake of this conversation, I'm determining a filler game by its price tag. And you may have a lot of games in your collection that are $5, $10, $15 games. That are taking up a lot of space on your shelves, and you may say, you know what, I want to take these 10 games, these 20 games that are worth 5, 10, 15 bucks, and I want to trade these 20 games in for one really expensive game. I'm going to take these 20 PlayStation 2 games and I'm going to trade them all in for Xenosaga 3, right? It happens. People do it all the time. Or I'm going to take these 30 PlayStation 2 games and I'm going to trade them in for Samurai Western or Silent Hill 4. It's a method to weeding out some of the filler titles. Again, filler by price tag, not by enjoyment. Relax, everyone. Relax. I know you guys can get. But that's one of the ways that you can take some of that stuff and trade it in and get some better games. And it's just a method of curating your collection. That's the fun thing about having a collection of games, is that you can curate at any time. You can shake things up at any time. You can, steer your collection more towards RPGs when you want to go RPG mode, or maybe you just want to keep your collection purely action based. All you want is action, arcade, fast paced types of games, and that's what you want your collection to be built around. It just depends on you, and that's totally fine. To each his own, different strokes for different folks, and all that jazz. But this is where my handheld collection is at. Like I said, when it comes to the Game Boy, the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, the Neo Geo Pocket, and the Game Gear. Obviously, I have other handhelds. I have the DS, the 3DS, the PSP, the Vita. That's a whole nother topic for maybe a whole nother day. Maybe I'll do and show you guys everything that I have in those two collections, because I do have an extensive PS Vita collection and an extensive PSP collection. Even my Game Boy, not Game Boy, but my DS collection is pretty hefty. I actually had to pull all of my DS and 3DS games off the shelf not that long ago, because I'm kind of reshuffling the deck and figuring out how I want to do my shelves. But perhaps one of these days, I'll take you all through all of the DS games and 3DS games in the collection, and then we can also take a look at the PSP and the PS Vita. But let me know what you guys think about the whole all killer, no filler concept. Do you think it makes sense? Is it for you? What methods do you use to curate your collection? Let me know what you think down in the comments. and I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.